Hey, welcome to Isekai Manhwa Recap. In this video, we'll be covering Chapter 1 to 9 of the Manhwa series SSS, Class Suicide Hunter. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon, to be sure you don't miss the next episodes. The story begins with news broadcasting about a tower called Babylon, which has an undefeated monster on its 40th floor. The news shows the Black Dragon Guild attempting to raid the floor but failing to defeat the boss monster. However, a hunter ranked number 1 single-handedly defeats the monster, earning the nickname the Flame Emperor. The hunter dislikes the name and reacts negatively to it. As the news spreads, online comments begin to drop, with people gossiping about the Flame Emperor dating another hunter called the Sand. An S-rank hunter named Kim Gongya repeatedly comments that he wants to become like the Flame Emperor. When the reporter asks the Flame Emperor to respond to aspiring hunters, he says that success is destined, and those who succeed should not start a beef with him, or else they will die. Kim Gongya is furious and starts to cry. Suddenly, a skill card appears before him, fueled by his envy of the Flame Emperor. The golden card contains a skill greater than his current S rank. It allows him to copy the skill of the enemy that kills him and make it his own. He yells out in surprise and shock, wondering what kind of skill this is. The tower suddenly appears in their world, visible from any horizon, with different floors containing monsters from another world. Those who first entered the tower were chosen by the tower and gained special skills. However, those who entered later only did so to hunt down the monsters. Kim Gongya is still affected negatively by the Flame Emperor's words and finds himself drowning his sorrows in a bar while news about the Flame Emperor's skill spreads. While being at the bar Ganga, Kim Gongya was not feeling the vibe of what was being broadcasted, so he asked the bar manager if they could watch something else. Gongya began to freak out and complained about his new skill. He told the bar manager that he couldn't even report it to the Hunters Association because he thought the skill was useless. The bar manager quickly told him to go outside and vomit. After throwing up, Gongya left the bar and kept thinking about everything until he saw the Flame Emperor and his alleged girlfriend, Miss Sanctus, arguing by the corner. He lurked around and listened as the Flame Emperor claimed to have poisoned Miss Sanctus, after she had initially tried to poison him. The Flame Emperor held the antidote that could cure her as leverage, so he asked Miss Sanctus to confess who had sent her to kill him. He asked her if it was the Black Dragon who sent her, but she didn't talk, so he burned her. Kim Gongya saw the fire illumination and couldn't help but go out of his hideout and shout "murderer, psychopath" before running away. The Flame Emperor caught up with him and killed him because he had seen what he had seen. Kim Gongya then woke up in a strange realm and saw a command that asked him to select a skill card. The skill card mysteriously copied the Flame Emperor's skill. However, he woke up in his room as the news of another Black Dragon Guild's failure cast a shadow. He wondered how he got to his room after the Flame Emperor killed him. He checked the skill card details and discovered he had been sent back 24 hours before his death. However, he figured out that he had copied that skill from the Flame Emperor. Kim Gongya realized that the Flame Emperor must have died due to the poison but had come back 24 hours prior, and that was how he knew what Miss Sanctus's moves were. Then he heard a fire outbreak outside. He went outside and saw people gathered. Different guild members had come to the scene waiting for the Flame Emperor. They tried to quench the fire with water, but it was in vain. Kim Gongya knew the Flame Emperor had set the fire to cover his tracks. The Flame Emperor arrived and began to praise himself, asking what rewards they would give him if he stopped the fire. Gongya got tired of the Flame Emperor's bad attitude and decided to kill him. He entered the fire to buy himself another 24 hours back in time, but he died in the fire. When he returned, he finally understood that no matter how much he tried to kill the Flame Emperor would still return 24 hours before him since they both had the same skill. He then figured out that the Flame Emperor's first awakening was 11 years ago on June 7th, which meant his permanent death could only be met 40 to 45 days ago. So, he decided to kill himself 40 to 45 times. He keeps stabbing himself and waking up each day in reverse. Finally, Gongya reaches the present day when the legend of the Flame Emperor begins, and he sets out to kill him. Gongya first observes all the Flame Emperor's movements by dying 10 more times. Each time he dies, he uses the opportunity to study the Flame Emperor's entire lifestyle, knowing his daily movements and routines. He times him throughout and finally gets to him on the 6th floor. Gongya disguises himself as someone in need of urgent help and offers the Flame Emperor 20 gold to buy his portion of the kill. However, out of greediness, the Flame Emperor extorts Gongya and takes all his money without giving him the portion. The Flame Emperor even decides to kill Gongya since he knows he has wronged him. As Usaha tries to kill Gongya, Gongya rises suddenly and stabs him. The Flame Emperor is shocked and Gongya feeds him to the wolves. Ganya changes his blood-soaked clothes to a new one hidden in the ground and leaves to transfer to the first-floor city. He comes across a vigilante corps who seems to be unaware of anything, and the news says nothing of Usaha. He drinks beer recklessly and is very happy that the terrible legend of the Flame Emperor is no more. Suddenly, an old man walks in requesting vodka and sugar in warm milk. Ganya looks at the old man suspiciously. The old man is the rank 100 in this era, and Ganya thinks of how skillful the old man is. He continues to plunder, knowing that dying in the hands of any hunter means he will be able to copy their skills, even the skills of the current rank 1. Still in the bar, the old man, also known as the Sword Saint Marcus Kalimberry, starts to talk to himself, and somehow it feels like he's referring to Ganya. Following that weird moment, Ganya gets terrible messages on his phone about the Sword Saint. In these messages, Ganya learns of a word that should never be spoken to the Sword Saint. To buttress the message, a short story is being narrated on how the Sword Saint reacts to a group of hunters on the 9th floor hunting grounds where he strikes them after they mock his grandchildren. An advisory message pops in, saying, if you don't want to die, don't talk about his grandchildren in front of Sword Saint. All the messages are a big surprise to Ganya. Sword Saint King bores everyone in the bar with his attitude, then leaves. Ganya follows him, wondering what kind of awesome skill the Sword Saint will have. Although Usaha has such an amazing X-rank returning skill, Ganya is curious. When they get to the bush where nobody can see what is happening, the Sword King suddenly turns to him, and Ganya asks for his favor. He begins to say words that Ganya doesn't understand. He finally accuses him of murder after he claims to have seen the number of kills on his head. Ganya begins to think about Usuwa as his only kill, but it turns out Ganya has actually killed 4,091 people including the Flame Emperor and himself 40 times. This is the number of kills that the Sword Saint can see, which terrifies the Sword King and prompts him to attack Ganya. The Sword King swings his sword, but Ganya dodges it and trips, falling to the ground. As the Sword King talks to himself, Ganya begins to think that the Sword Saint is sharing his information with other people, which will make him very notorious and everyone will come after him, eventually leading to his hanging. Ganya figures he has to die to copy the Sword Saint's skills, then says words that anger the Sword King the most in his life. Ganya speaks ill of the Sword Saint's grandkids, prompting the Sword King to behead him immediately. Ganya dies and goes back to the realm of skill acquisition, where he will pick one of the Sword Saint's skills with the golden card, just as he did with the Flame Emperor. He then has difficulty in selecting a card because there is no golden card, only silver and bronze cards. Finally, he picks a card and beseeches the card to give him the skill behind the Sword Saint's success. The Sword Saint's skill is then copied, and he returns back to life. He learns that he doesn't have the main Sword Saint skill, but he has an A+ passive skill. He opens the skill card and suddenly hears someone talking beside him on the same bed, but he doesn't know who it is. Ganya hears the words of this strange guy as he talks about Gramps and going to train. He replies to this strange guy, and when he looks at Ganya, it shocks him too because he used to be with the Sword Saint. He asks Ganya if he can see him, and he says he can. This strange guy is actually a ghost but can only be seen by whoever has him as his skill. Ganya eventually discovers that he copied the Sword Saint's skill of having a ghost around him which only he can see and talk to. This explains why the Sword Saint has been talking to himself all this while. Those thin screams return him back to the Gramps right now. The ghost starts to freak out that he is in the company of a kid who talks to him anyhow. He starts to blame the Sword Saint for not being responsible enough until a random kid clones him to himself. Ganya talks about the Sword Saint seeing the kill count on his head, and the ghost disbelieves him instantly. How can an amateur like you kill that much? The ghost asks. Ganga explains how he earned that number of kills and how he ended up in the current era and his will to die by the Sword Saint's hands so he can copy his powers to become the number 1 hunter. The ghost hears him out and ends the conversation by asking Ganya to let him see him hunt some monsters. They go to the hunting ground, and Ganya begins to kill monsters. The ghost finds out Ganya doesn't have any remarkable hunter's talent, but his lack of fear for death makes him spectacular. The ghost exclaims that the Sword Saint also has another version of him on his side, and he would like to see who gets better between Gong Yan and the Sword Saint. The ghost begins to like him and claims to help him get better than anyone else. He wants Ganya to take over the tower. The ghost shouts at Ganya to wake up and requests 5 minutes. The ghost insists that Ganya rises up from bed, and when he manages to, he discovers that it's still 4 a.m. in the morning. They begin to quarrel, and the ghost calls him a zombie-ass mother since he just doesn't die. However, they go out and discuss as they walk. The ghost criticizes Ganya for lacking talents and somehow makes a gesture of him. Later, they go to give and take a monopoly on the tower's economy owned by the rank 300 called Countess. Her cheat skill makes it possible for users to trade with the outside world. Ganya speaks to the attendant who wears a cat ear cap. He requests his lottery winnings, and the attendant gets shocked when she collects Ganya's identification slip and sees 53 grams. She goes to call the manager straight away. The manager comes and tells Ganya to follow him to the upper floor. When they get there, he shows him his 53-0 gold. However, he gives him a choice to either take the money or save it. Ganya decides to save it. He then decides to buy Sang Ryan's honorary guild member title. Ganya doesn't belong to any guild on the tower yet, so he decides to join one because he figures out that the Flame Emperor rejected every guild, thereby making enemies of large guilds. They eventually tried to poison him. He also asks the manager to get him a better apartment. He finally asks the manager to conceal his identity if any news outlet asks who the first place winner was. Ganya gets everything under control, and that impresses the ghost. Ganya and the ghost walk along the city, and the ghost advises him to either read scrolls of martial arts or get potions to boost his physical abilities. The ghost then recommends that he gets the potion instead and suggests a store they can get it. So they head there. The Sword Saint passes by, and Ganya quickly hides behind a trash can. The Sword Saint enters the same shop they want to get the potions. Since the Sword Saint is around, it becomes suicidal for Ganya to enter the shop, so he figures out another shop, and they head there. As they go through the slum, the people around think Ganya is crazy as he talks to himself. When they get to the shop, they witness how the alchemist is being blamed for owing for long, and all her instruments and portions are being taken away. The alchemist pleads with them, but they turn deaf ears on her. The alchemist stands in the middle of the road, helpless. She tries to get people to buy her portions, but they complain about how expensive her portions are. Ganya then goes to her and tells her he wants to place an expensive order. The alchemist gets the biggest shock of her life when Ganya mentions 20k for the portion he wants to order.